Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101 here, and today we're talking about something a little different. We're talking about the God. The God are known for many great things, from great memes to last stands to standing fast even after the planet broke. Now, we know in 40k that the Imperium is not what the Emperor had in mind. And most people often say, oh, the God is supposed to be like the Solar Auxilia or the Sisters of Battle, they're just a shadow of their former self. Or are they? In fact, is the God actually supposed to be weak? Were they meant just to be cannon fodder? And if that's the case, what exactly did the Emperor mean for baseline humanity? Well, strap on in, we're going to talk about all that and more as we get into today's video. But before we can talk about theories and discussing all that nonsense, we need to first establish just what exactly is the Imperial Guard. For those of you who know what the Imperial Guard is, bear with me as I go a bit of a look over here. You may indeed find out something that you didn't know. And for all of you who have no idea what the Guard is or only understand the memes, listen carefully, because this stuff is important. The Imperial Guard, known as the Astra Militarum in High Gothic, aka 40k Latin, is the main ground forces of the Imperium man's military. The origins of the Guard start way back, during the reunification wars on Terra. You see, when Big E started conquering, he had his Thunder Warriors, he had his Custodes, but he also had the Old 100. These were 100 regiments of elite units. These include the Lucifer Blacks and the Genome 52. These were basically mini Space Marines. These guys are significantly above the standard Guard, even the Solar Auxilia. They are just completely different. But the reunification wars would take their toll on them, and many of them would be nearly destroyed, and the remainder would be retired. From there, as the Emperor began spreading out, and after he took care of the Thunder Warriors and created the Space Marines, he would establish the Imperial Army. The Imperial Army was a combined arms formation consisting of ground troops, as well as accompanying air assets and void assets. TLDR, you had a whole lot of tanks, whole lot of infantry, whole lot of artillery, a whole bunch of aircraft, transports, and gunships, and all of them had their own battleships and troop transports in the void. Self-contained mini-armies essentially, and one guy was in charge of pretty much everything. These were then combined into expeditionary fleets, which usually had a core of Adeptus Astartes elements supported by Solar Auxilia, that being the elite of the Imperial Army. They made about a quarter of the Imperial Army, and the rest were regular old Imperial regiments. However, after the heresy, the Imperium was really skeptical of combined arms regiments. Because what happened is, while a lot of people sided with traitors or loyalists, a lot went renegade and established their own planets, meaning that during the Scouring, the Space Marines had to clear out a lot of pocket empires and rogue governors. So, to fix this, the Imperium divided the Imperial Army into two sects. One being the Imperial Navy, or the Armada Imperialis, which consists of all the big chunkin' void ships, battleships, and void transports, as well as the Aeronautica Imperialis, or the Imperial Air Force. That's all the fighter wings, bomber wings, etc. And then the ground forces became the Imperial Guard, or the Astra Militarum. So the way that the Guard works is pretty simple. You have multiple regiments. Regiments could be literally anything. You have artillery regiments, you have infantry regiments, you have armored regiments, you have tank regiments, you have super heavy regiments. Basically, the whole idea is that a governor or an Imperial Guard commander will get 2 or 3 infantry regiments, 1 artillery regiment, 1 armored regiment, and from there they'll combine into ad hoc combined arms groups, and they'll attack like that. That way, they still get the benefit of combined arms, but it mitigates any possibility of them going rogue. Because if an entire artillery regiment goes rogue, yeah, that's a lot of bang, but they can be countered by fast-moving light armor. Now, that isn't to mean that combined arms regiments are completely absent, but they're only to the most loyal of loyal regiments, such as the Cadian Shock Troopers, the Death Corps of Krieg, and the Armageddon Steel Legion. Basically, if you're not a named legion, you better have a damn good reason for having a combined arms regiment. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much the Guard in modern day 40k. Now, a lot of you who know the Guard and are big fans are waiting for me to bring up one very important thing, and that is the Guard's greatest weakness, and arguably its greatest strength: diversity. You see, the Imperium is so decentralized it would make the Holy Roman Empire look like an actual successor of the Roman state, with Terra literally not knowing what planets are doing and having no recollection whatsoever of their governors or history or anything. Meaning that the quality of the Imperial Guard relays from a planet, and even more so their PDF. Side note, let's talk about the PDF real quick. PDF stands for Planetary Defense Force. They are essentially garrison troops, second line troops. Initially, you'll start as your training in the PDF, and then if you're good enough, you get transferred to the Guard, where you'll be sent all over the world, or if you're not that good enough, you'll stay and defend the planet. But the training for the PDF and Guard vary wildly. You have the Cadian PDF, known as White Shields, which are pretty much just like mainline Guard regiments, and then the actual Cadian shock troops themselves, which are far beyond anything that any planet can hope to get. But then you literally have feudal regiments, which are knights, with swords. And then you have feral regiments, which are literal Bronze Age cavemen. And I'm not exaggerating, those are literal regiments that do exist. Now, this diversity is its greatest strength, but also its greatest weakness. It means that it's a coin toss. You could be getting some really proper deathcore, which are just nasty in every single thing. Or you could be getting some run-of-the-mill militia, which are pretty much useless. But that also means that some units can specialize heavily, such as the Deathcore Creek, which are masters of trench and siege warfare, the Kanakan Jungle Fighters, which are masters of asymmetrical warfare, and the Talon Desert Raiders, which are masters of desert warfare, armored warfare, and asymmetrical combat. But now that you have a gist of it, let's get into the very meat of this video, which is going to be talking about the what-if aspect. Important note, everything I have just said is written from the authors, it is canon, it is lore-friendly, and you should treat it as solid fact. Everything from this point on in the video is going to be me filling in bits and bobs here and there. Taking A, taking B, and seeing how I can make them together to make C. I've taken the time to put these facts together to give you a better understanding. So, take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. So, with that in mind, let's get talking about what the God really is. You see, when talking about the God, people often bring up the diversity and be like, oh, the God was supposed to be centralized, the Imperium is decentralized, it's terrible, it's rubbish. Which, is a point. The Emperor did want a centralized realm. Famously, he remarked upon seeing Rabute Gilliman's realm that he was incredibly proud of his creation. In fact, Ultramar became a gold standard for what the Imperium should be. And Ultramar is pretty centralized. But the thing is, though, people often make the mistake of thinking that Imperial regiments during the Imperial Army days were standardized, which they were not. Yes, there was an Imperial Army standard, and yeah, it was more closely followed, but there were feral regiments in the Imperial Army. There were feudal regiments in the Imperial Army as well. Some people think that the Solar Auxilia are the main line, and they're not. They are the elite. Granted, they make up a full quarter of the army, and they are standardized to hell and back, but they're still a quarter. The other 75%, well, we don't really know. A good estimate that I've come to is this. 50% are about standardized, that being Imperial Army regiments. So these are really good, really well-trained, really disciplined units that the Emperor could rely on. But then, what about the other 25%? The other 25% are essentially mishmash. Feral units, feudal units, weird hyper-technology units. And what you also need to understand is that there were some regiments that were even better than the Solar Auxilia. We have accounts throughout the Great Crusade of encountering very advanced people, very advanced civilizations that really did put the Imperium to shame. And not just Xenos races. Vulcan's first debut in combat, alongside Ferrus Manus and the Emperor, he met a civilization which had automaton mechas powered by blood, specifically child blood. Now, as horrifying as that is, such technology is incredibly advanced if crude. Moreover, we have more examples of there being Astartes level units, men, humans, who were able to effectively fight at the same level as Astartes, or close enough, i.e. they had advanced training, they had heightened muscle growth, they had power armor, they had bolters, they had chainswords. They were essentially somewhat equivalent to Space Marines, meaning that there is a possibility that in the Imperial Army there were regiments drawn from the planet that were essentially Space Marines, but not Space Marines. You could have Imperial Army regiments that had power armor, they had bolters, they were vat-grown, maybe they had some type of cloning mechanism. Anything was possible. Now, if you're looking at your head and you're going, that doesn't really seem quite right, think about it like this. There are aliens who can manipulate time. I think dudes having power armor and stems, not really the most craziest thing in the world. So, the diversity was always there. But now onto the main thing. You see, most people think that the Emperor, what he wanted to do is he wanted to standardize the God. Right, he wanted to make them all Solar Auxilia, he wanted to make them perfect. They were supposed to be basically Space Marines, and Space Marines were supposed to be Custodes, and Custodes were supposed to be Primarchs, and Primarchs were supposed to be Gods, and the Emperor was supposed to be some type of amalgamation of every single thing in the universe. But that is what I like to call progressive imagination. You see, we just assume that because it's the most optimistic outcome. Everyone becomes better. Now, there are some instances of the Emperor and some theories and hints of him being like, oh, the Emperor essentially wanted to turn all of humanity into mini versions of himself, advanced evolutionary psychic nonsense. Again, that's hinted at, but it's never really confirmed. So that is one point. But what if? What if that was only for some of humanity? You see, the Emperor was a pragmatist. He was an asshole, but he was also a pragmatist. He didn't really care about your feelings. He did what he thought was best. He did what he thought needed to be done, and he did it regardless of how you felt and what happened to you specifically. Angron is a perfect case. He needed Angron to be alive. He didn't care about Angron's wishes. He didn't care about helping Angron. He chose specifically to grab Angron and keep him aboard his ship because that's what he wanted. That's, in his mind, what needed to happen for humanity to achieve its goal. Again, some people theorize and it's suggested that Magnus's duty, his job, was to essentially sit upon the Golden Throne and power it, protecting the webway. Now, we don't really know much about it, but in the most worst case scenario, Big E basically condemned his most powerful psychic son, one of the sons who was most closest to him by default, to be a battery for his side project. The man is a ruthless pragmatist at the end of the damn day. So, while it's possible, yes, he did want some of humanity to essentially become mini-omnipotent psychers, and essentially shed the mortal form and be purely made of psychic energy and live in the webway away from chaos, who's to say he wanted all of humanity to do that? Who's to say that he would allow all of humanity to do that? While it does sound nice, neat, and beautiful that Big E's end goal was to transform all of us into mini Primarchs, and to create basically the new race of the old ones, to be the new inheritors of the galaxy, wouldn't it make much more sense for Big E to be like, right, the best, the brightest, you shall become the new race of demigods. All of you others, though, you're gonna stay where you are, and you're gonna serve us. Wouldn't it make more sense for Big E to have a ruling caste and a labor caste? And in that labor caste, there would be laborers, there would be manufacturers, there would be people who would work basically unto death to keep the webway running, to keep factories up and running. And then there would be the Imperial Guard, armed with basically nothing, meant to do nothing but simply be fodder. Think about it. The random Imperial Guard regiments, armed with barely decent flak armor and autoguns. They are thrown at the Harad. Instantly, within seconds, they are turned to dust. Friends, family, loved ones, everyone gone. Hundreds upon thousands just finished. All the while, the elite demigods, using their psychic manifestations of divine wrath, are destroying the Harad and reaching their king, their lord, and executing him. Why would the Emperor sacrifice his divine demigods when he could have hordes of the unwashed masses, the expendable caste, take the brunt? You see, what I'm getting at is this. The Imperial Guard was never meant to be elite. They were never meant to be good. What if the Guard were meant just to be fodder? That the worst of the worst, anyone the Emperor would deem a criminal, an idiot, a deviant, a heretic, anyone who he deemed unworthy of godhood, would be thrown into the slaughterhouse. At least then they could serve some purpose. While the demigods of the Emperor, whom he deemed perfect humans, would rise above and inherit the webway. Instead of the perfect Imperium we think of, we could get a dystopian future in where the elite of the elite live in luxury away from the sin of flesh in the webway. Whereas everyone else, the undesirables, live out in real world, barely scraping by an existence, living miserable life. And the Guard is just thrown to absorb blow after blow and smother the enemy, dying horrible, cruel deaths, while the demigods, they simply claim the glory. And as they return from slaying the enemy, they walk upon the corpse-sown mud, stepping upon what once was brave men and women, giving them so much as little regard as dirt upon their foot. And so too would millions upon billions of humans end their lives, forgotten, unremembered, unloved, dying in the muck, with horror on their lips and pain upon their face. Now that would be a truly grim, dark reality. And I hate to break it to you, kid, but that is what the modern-day Guard is. Whilst the Guard has many elite units, we have units of heavy infantry armed purely in carapace. We have regiments that are fully armed in power armor. Not as good as Adeptus Astartes, but kind of like the Sisters of Battle. And we do have some Solar Auxilia still kicking around here and there, even if they aren't named Solar Auxilia. But they have the arms, the armor, and the gear. But they are not common enough to make a difference. Sure, there may be like 1 million of them, But in a world of 1,000,000 planets, brother, that ain't nothing. The average planet does not even know what a Chaos Space Marine is. The average planet does not even know what the hell an orc is. The average planet deals with rebellions, uprisings, sometimes even fight amongst each other like feudal lords over resources, over rights, over honor, for God's sakes. They are not prepared for the evils of the galaxy. Meaning that when a guard regiment gets yeeted to a planet, all of a sudden, they're just gone. Because they weren't trained for Chaos Space Marines, they weren't trained for orcs. Hell, they didn't even know the damn bastards existed. So why are you surprised that they're dying like dogs? Meaning that the average guard is utterly incapable of serving as anything but frontline fodder. And the guard does that well. To their credit, those bastards sell their lives dearly. And as they do, Space Marines swoop in and kill the enemy leader. Space Marines, the Emperor's Angels of Death, his Demi-Gods, they ignore the enemy, while the orcs are devouring and slaughtering the poor guard in their trenches who didn't even know that these foul mushroom bastards existed. The noble Space Marine Demi-Gods run in and they slaughter the war boss, they kill him dead, and they claim his head as a trophy. And then the orcs are routed and the day is won, the planet is saved. And the Space Marines lost about maybe 5 battle brothers, and the guard about 500,000. And no, that is not an exaggeration. So, ladies and gentlemen, you see that the Emperor's vision of a dystopian reality is true. It exists, but it's a dystopian reality without any of the benefit. You see, in this theory, what the Emperor may want to have done, he may have wanted to have created a race of demigods, but these were mini-emperors, right? They lived perfectly in harmony in the webway. Humanity would have ruled the galaxy. Humanity is fighting for its very life, for its position in the galaxy. And this is the dystopia we live in? It has all of the cons, but none of the pros. Meaning that the Emperor failed. He failed terribly. Beyond terribly. Now, obviously that is a beautiful thought, and let us dwell on how wonderful that is. But then, if that's the case, if the Emperor did want humanity to exist like that, and if it is so terrible, then what happens next? Is humanity just to continue on this path then? Slowly dying out? Being devoured by its enemies? Or will it eventually fade into the darkness of the night, lost as memory, as one day our remnants, the few of our descendants, will pick clean a battlefield and find a lasgun and wonder what terrible and mighty weapons did we once possess? Or will humanity rise to the occasion and create something new? Now you see, while the Emperor could have totally been a cruel pragmatist, what if everyone else is right? What if the established theory is actually correct? What if the Emperor wanted to turn everyone not into demigods, but what if he wanted to make humanity return to its primacy as it was back during the dark age of technology? I think y'all may be knowing where I'm going with this. We've taken a look at the pessimistic route, but now, what if we take a look at the optimistic route? What if we get what we've always wanted? So the next theory starts off as this. The Emperor wanted to replace every suit of Adeptus Astartes power armor with Terminator armor. The idea being that the Space Marines would be the bulwark, the anvil, the bastions, immovable fortresses, and the Imperial Guard and the Solar Auxilia, well, they would be the rest, and they would take care of everything else. If we follow this train of thought, that means that the Solar Auxilia, which already their elite formations did have access to power armor, and their officers did, not always, but there were records. That then could mean that they would get the power armor, and they would be the support for the Space Marines, and the Imperial Guard, the Imperial Army, they would then get the Solar Auxilia Void armor, which is a step above normal carapace armor. Essentially, you would have the Adeptus Astartes all clad in heavy-duty cataphracti Terminator plate, being immovable bastions. Regular Indominus Terminator armor can sustain far more than normal power armor, but cataphracti is significantly more than even Indomitus. So Space Marines are walking tanks, all but invulnerable to the most vicious of enemy fire. They're supported by the Solar Auxilia, which are now armed in power armor, and they have bolters. They're essentially mini Space Marines, and then even they are supported by the Imperial Guard, the Imperial Army, which are then clad in Solar Auxilia plate, which makes in even more than normal heavy infantry. It is layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and that is how humanity would evolve. And let's say the Emperor did introduce his new demigod race, well, they would be the elite of the elite. Now, we all know that, yeah, that could have happened, but it didn't. But can the Imperium get back to that point? And, well, yes, it can. But it is very unlikely. You see, what Bobby G is doing in modern day 40k is that he's trying to rebuild the Imperium from the ground up. He is trying to centralize it, he's trying to make it strong, and he's trying to bring it back to where it was. And with the return of the Primarchs, we are going to see something eventually in the future. The Imperium is going to reach a breaking point. It's going to reach a point where it can either choose to do what it needs to do, to grow, to evolve, and to adapt, or it can sink back into its sunken fallacies of degenerate feudal behavior. They have a choice. Will the Guard rise up to claim the power armor and the bolters that were supposed to be theirs, that the Emperor had envisioned to be theirs, or will they sink further and further into the tattered scriptures and clubbed maces which Lorgar, the chosen traitor of chaos, had ordained for them? Essentially, the Imperium may have another civil war. The progressives and the traditionalists, those who want to cling to the old ways, which would see them fall into the dirt, and those who wish to strive forward under the Primarchs. The Imperium is many things, but it is not rational. And with how the God Emperor is, they will choose faith over rationality. They will choose faith over life. They will choose faith over everything. And we know for a fact that Guilliman does not like the Ecclesiarchy, and the Ecclesiarchy has clashed with Guilliman. We also know that the Imperium is not above revolting against the Primarch. When Guilliman came back, the original High Lords revolted against him, which required Guilliman to bend them over, gave them a right spank, and establish a new set of High Lords. Eventually, this is going to happen. There will be another civil war in the Imperium, and it's going to be one of two things. The Imperium will lose a bunch of fringe worlds, but it will eventually come out stronger under the Primarchs, or the Imperium will devolve into something different. It will win, but the Primarchs will be slain, or they will be gone, or they will break away and form their own Imperium. Then what will happen to the God then? We will have what the Imperium was supposed to be. We will have the 500 worlds of Ultramar. We will have the Lion leading a crusade with modern day, what the Imperium was supposed to be, back to the days of the Great Crusade, and we'll have half of the Imperium which is stagnating, rotting, festering, devolving further and further into where lasguns become prized arms of the elite, where carapace armor is reserved only for those who are the most veteran of veterans, who anything other than a mere club is considered prized beyond all aspects. The Imperium has a choice. The God has a choice. They can choose to rise and claim what the Emperor had for them, or they will fall into obscurity and dust, or hell, maybe they'll do both. Maybe the Imperium will be split down the middle. The Imperium is an analogy for Rome. Maybe East and West will split. Maybe the West will split into splinter kingdoms and fall into the grave dark ages of feudalism. And the East under Ultramar and the Lion will evolve and become the true mantle of the Imperium. All in all, we don't know what the God was supposed to be. Was the God supposed to be the best of the Imperium? Did the Emperor truly believe that every single soldier of humanity could be a space marine, or at least close to one? Or did the Emperor, in his pragmatism, in his understanding, in his knowledge, and in his wisdom, understand that sacrifices had to be made, that only a few could achieve such greatness, and the vast majority had to suffer and die? Ultimately, we will never know, because the Emperor was slain and eternalized upon the Golden Throne. But whereas y'all expected me to cover the pessimistic option, and then now we've covered the optimistic option, I'm going to throw you a curveball. That curveball is the God option. Because when Biggie was making his plans, he didn't imagine himself being a skeleton upon a golden throne, did he? So, what is the Emperor going to do with the God now? Biggie is a god. For all intents and purposes, he's the god of humanity, whether he wants to be or not. We know from his interactions with Guilliman when speaking to him, he is not the Emperor anymore. He is not the mortal man. He is something eldritch in nature, unrecognizable. There are rumors of the Yellow King, or the King in Yellow, essentially a man building up an army to serve the Imperium or to lead it to damnation. Honestly, we don't know. But he's essentially a type of figure that could usher in 40k's version of Ragnarok, or it could help it save it. Could he save it by destroying it? Well, we don't know. And that begs the question, what is the Emperor doing? Is the Emperor slowly becoming to a point where he will become a god? Is he yet to become a god? Has he become a god and he's planning to do something with humanity? We know that the Emperor exerts his power over the living saints. We know that the Emperor can impart his knowledge to Space Marines. What about the Legion of the Damned? They are warp entities. But what is the Emperor going to do with them? Is it only Space Marines that become Damned Legionnaires? What about the Guard? Do we get the Damned Guard? Is the Emperor slowly building up an entire army? Is the Emperor going to essentially declare war on Chaos? Will the Emperor act like the Chaos Guards, but the Order version? Will the Emperor, upon his golden throne, eventually when he has reached a point, unleash his horde of demonic guard, Imperial angels, smothering Chaos, closing the Great Rift? Or will he create a new war? Will the mortal men of the Imperium be suffocated under the violence of angel and demon? Will we go back to the days of the Old Testament where man cowered in horror as righteous angel battled evil demon, when fire clashed against darkness above the skies and mortal man clung unto one another, praying unto the heavens that they would survive, as fire and brimstone rained upon him, as the ichor of demons and the blood of angels descended upon the earth, showering it and staining it in vicious violence? What will the Emperor do? Because the Emperor isn't the Emperor anymore. He's something altogether different. Guilliman did not recognize him. Guilliman could not believe he was who he was. Guilliman may believe he is in fact a god. And if he is a god in Warhammer, well, the gods of Warhammer, at least in 40k, tend to follow one very important rule: war. Is the Emperor willing to unleash his hordes of Imperial angels and re-establish the Imperium as purely an angelic realm, a warp realm, where all human beings are made up of demonic energy? The Emperor wanted to turn all of us into demigods, so what if he still wants to do that, but in his own twisted way? The Emperor is broken, so his idea is broken. What if the Emperor, in his broken wisdom, wants to unleash the entirety of his warp, his kingdom of sand, Space Marine and God, the souls of the Imperium, collected over 10,000 years of torment? What if he wishes to unleash them upon the Imperium, that no mortal should remain, that all will become either his Imperial angels, and they will fight the demons of chaos over the mortal realms? You see, the Great Eye already opened, the Secretrix Maledictum is already in fact, half of the Imperium is smothered in warp darkness. What if the Emperor finally snaps? What if he loses what little bit he has left, and he unleashes his warp upon the other half of humanity? For the Emperor wishes to save us. And how does he save us? Well, Chaos can't claim our mortal souls if we become Imperial angels, if we become warp entities, if we become demons. But demons of the Emperor. But then, is the Emperor still a god? Or is he just a Satan? But a Satan of order rather than chaos. And then what will the galaxy truly look like? Will it be legions of gold-clad eyes burning with holy fire, human beings chanting sermons, wielding flaming swords, charging against demonic hordes? I suppose in that case, all of us will be demigods. We'll certainly no longer be human. And ultimately, in the end, maybe the Emperor will win. He wanted to turn us all into demigods. But maybe in his broken mind, demigods and warp demons are one and the same. And if that is the case, then Warhammer 40k will truly be war without end. Half of the galaxy smothered in demons of light, the other half devoured by demons of darkness. And back and forth shall they fight, a war without end. For then, truly, in the grim darkness of the far future, there will be only war. Or maybe GW could just say fuck it and fast forward the setting 10,000 years in the future and everyone is fucked. I don't fucking know. I'm just a dude who makes videos on the internet. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, by the way. But yeah, Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys also very much for watching. I do love and appreciate you. But yeah, let me know down below. Comment. What do you guys think? Do you think the Emperor meant for us to have 2 castes, Demi-Gods and then fodder? Do you think that he meant to have all of us become the elite space marines and return to the dark age of humanity? And what do you think about the wildcard option? Do you think maybe the Emperor would just lose his marbles and turn us all into Imperial angels? Demons? I don't know. Let me hear what you guys think down below. Also, I just want to remind you guys, check the timestamp. Everything from that point onwards is me just speculating. This is me putting 2 and 2 together and seeing if it makes 4. Maybe it makes fish. I don't know. But this is just to keep you guys thinking. But I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for being here and for watching. And I want to say even more massive thank you to my wonderful members. Shouting out to the Lieutenant here, we have Ediv V3 and Miss Majora of the Void. Then shout out to my 2 Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damok and Mr. Andy McGee. And then big shout out to my 2 private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslons and Mr. Ivan_SVW. Thank you, all of you guys, so very much. It means well to me that you guys do this. So yeah, I am beyond thankful and grateful. So if you guys want to gain access to these videos a full day early, some special benefits, talking to your boy, seeing some behind the scenes stuff, getting access to all of the special nonsense, join up to the memberships. It gives me the security to make these videos, and it's just nice to have them. But remember, this will always be free, and the best way to support is simply by just watching and commenting. It doesn't matter if you don't pay, I will love you no matter the same. Yes, I will. Mwah. But ladies and gentlemen, I have been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank y'all all so very much for watching. Make sure to stay loyal to their boys and gals, and I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. I want to make it very clear, from the timestamp in the video onwards, it is conjecture. Conjecture, alright? It's not canon. My god. Also, could you imagine if the Emperor just lost his shit and turns us all into demons? That'd be fucking wild, bro.